Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever met up with an old friend, someone you used to be incredibly close with, fully expecting to just pick up exactly where you left off?
Oh, yeah. You think it's going to be just like old times.
Right, but then you find that you just can't speak to them as naturally as before. You're sitting there across from each other in a coffee shop, and well, you had been looking forward to seeing them, but something just feels different.
The silence just feels incredibly heavy.
Exactly. You don't dislike them, but it's awkward. And you're left wondering, like, have they changed? Or maybe, have I changed? And should I keep trying to force this reconnection or just politely maintain my distance?
And, the common reflex is to view that awkwardness as a fracture.
Yeah.
Like we sit in that discomfort and immediately interpret it as a failure of the bond.
Which is exactly why today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of translated philosophical texts. They detail a modern framework called reflective humanism.
And these aren't your typical self-help books, I should add.
No, not at all. They offer these really rigorous structural analyses of time, memory, and just how human beings relate to each other. Our mission on this deep dive is to figure out exactly why going backward to an old relationship never seems to work, and how we can actually move forward.
And what's fascinating here is that the reflective humanism framework asks us to step back and look at the underlying structure. That discomfort in the coffee shop isn't necessarily a loss of affection. It is simply, well, the trace of time actively entering the
The
relationship.
trace of time.
Right. It forces us to pose a fundamental question for you, the listener. Does a reunion actually mean returning to a past relationship?
Okay, let's unpack this because that trace of time idea is so crucial. We tend to treat periods of no contact, whether it's a few months or a decade, like a pause button on a remote control.
Yeah, we assume it's just this static blank period.
Right. But when you actually think about the mechanics of human life, it isn't blank at all. While you weren't speaking, I mean, both of you changed jobs, navigated new social circles, shifted your core values.
You might have even looked back at the history you share and completely reinterpreted those past events.
Exactly. The life happening off screen didn't stop. It's kind of like trying to load a saved video game file, fully expecting your characters to be standing exactly where you left them in the original town.
With the exact same inventory. Right.
Yeah. But in this scenario, the game kept playing itself while you were logged out. The characters kept leveling up, exploring totally different maps, talking to different people, and then you log back in and demand they act like they did in level 1.
Which is completely ignoring the sheer volume of data that was processed while you were gone.
Right.
The cognitive mechanism at play here is what makes this so difficult to navigate. I mean, the human brain is incredibly efficient, which often means it relies heavily on cached data.
Like saved files on a computer.
Exactly. It takes way less energy to pull up a saved static file of who your friend was 5 years ago than it does to actively process the entirely new person sitting in front of you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we assume the relationship was safely kept in a vacuum. But structurally, a reunion actually looks like this. You have two people in the past, followed by a period of no contact.
The blank period.
Right. And during that gap, those two people live entirely separate lives, undergoing all these separate invisible changes.
Yeah.
So by the time the reunion happens, the individuals meeting are fundamentally not the same people who parted ways.
Because that unseen data was processed.
Exactly. A reunion fundamentally cannot restore the former versions of two people. Instead of a restoration, a reunion brings together two present, updated individuals who just happen to carry a shared archive of memories.
So the memories are intact, but the operating systems holding them have been upgraded.
That is exactly it.
Which really explains why the initial contact is so painful. I mean, when we reach out, we usually expect the exact same language, the exact same emotional distance.
We want our old roles back.
Right. If I was the spontaneous, funny one and you were the grounded, serious one, I want those dynamics instantly reinstated. And when they aren't, the brain basically sets off an alarm.
That alarm goes off because we fall into the trap of what the texts call the past standard.
The past standard.
Yeah. When the past becomes the unyielding benchmark for a relationship, any deviation in the present is automatically flagged as a negative error.
Oh, I see.
So if the other person acts differently, if they are, a bit more reserved, or they just communicate with a different cadence, we don't see it as a neutral update. We assume they have become cold.
Like they're purposely pulling away.
Right. We assume the distance has permanently grown or that the relationship is damaged. Because we are rigidly using the past as our baseline, natural, inevitable human change is misread as rejection, or betrayal.
Wait, so if change is being misread as betrayal, that means every time I've been offended by an old friend feeling distant, they weren't necessarily rejecting me at all.
Probably not, no.
I was just judging their current reality by a completely outdated rule book. They're just existing in the present, but I'm taking it as a personal slight against our shared history.
The framework highlights that exact friction. You are taking their present reality as an insult to your past connection.
Wow.
However, the source texts do provide a very crucial structural caveat here, which we have to mention.
Right, because we shouldn't romanticize every single difference as just healthy personal growth.
Exactly. There is a vital distinction between natural change being unfairly interpreted as betrayal and a relationship that genuinely is no longer available.
So sometimes that newly introduced distance is an actual intentional refusal of contact.
Yes. If someone is exhibiting toxic behavior or actively establishing a boundary to push you away, that is a real boundary,
Yeah.
not just the philosophical passage of time.
Okay, that makes sense. The challenge is just learning not to confuse an updated identity with an active emotional betrayal.
Precisely.
But assuming it is a healthy dynamic and not a toxic boundary, how do we actually tell the difference in the moment? Because let's go back to that coffee shop.
Yeah.
You're physically sitting at the same table, looking at the same menu, breathing the same air, but it feels like you're existing in totally different time zones. How does the brain create that massive disconnect in the same room?
Well, the texts define this specific phenomenon as phase mismatch.
Phase mismatch.
Yeah. It's the structural reality that multiple conflicting timelines are flowing into a single physical reunion. The illusion of physical proximity basically tricks us.
Because you are sharing the same spatial coordinates.
Right. Your brain assumes you are sharing the same temporal space-like, the same phase of the relationship. But you usually aren't.
I can picture that disconnect perfectly, but what does a phase mismatch actually look like in practice? Like, walk me through how those timelines clash.
Okay, imagine one person arrives at the coffee shop, eager to do a deep dive into their shared history. They've been processing old conflicts during the years apart, and, well, they are in a phase of wanting to resolve past issues and finally clear the air.
They want full relationship restoration.
Exactly. They showed up for an intense emotional summit. But the other person is operating on a completely different timeline.
And let me guess, they just want a casual chat.
Right. They have integrated the past, moved on entirely, and they arrived just wanting a light, easy update on current events to confirm you're both still on good terms.
You can physically feel the tension in that scenario. I mean, they aren't even attending the same meeting.
No, they aren't. And when those phases mismatch so drastically, the friction is immense.
Because the person wanting the emotional summit feels dismissed and undervalued.
While the person wanting the casual update feels suffocated and interrogated, being in the same physical space completely masks the fact that their internal clocks are years apart.
But if both people are constantly updating off-screen, isn't there a huge risk that you just never align again?
It's a valid fear.
Like, if we can't return to what the relationship was and we're always risking this phase mismatch because we're both moving targets, does that mean the relationship has effectively ended? How do you maintain any long-term bond if you just have to give up on the past?
You don't give up on the connection, but you do have to change the mechanism of how it survives. The texts offer a very pragmatic solution here, the concept of regeneration.
Regeneration, so not restoration.
Right. A relationship continues not by remaining statically unchanged, but by constantly updating its method of connection. The standard of success has to shift from perfectly matching the past to acknowledging the present.
So we aren't taking an antique chair, sanding it down, and painting it to look exactly like it did in 1995. We are taking the materials we have today and building a completely new piece of furniture.
The architecture changes, yes. Regeneration might mean accepting a much wider emotional distance or, perhaps a different frequency of contact.
Okay, that feels a lot more sustainable.
It is. And a key structural component of this is what the texts call light reconnection.
My reconnection.
Yeah. In our culture, we place this massive, crushing pressure on a reunion to definitively determine the relationship's ultimate fate in a single meeting.
Oh, we absolutely do that.
We sit down for coffee and subconsciously demand a verdict. By the time the check comes, we need to know, are we best friends again, or are we officially strangers?
Because we want it neatly categorized and filed away so our brains can stop processing the ambiguity.
Exactly. But regeneration pushes against that.
So it's more like keeping a door slightly cracked instead of forcing yourself to either bolt it shut forever or throw it completely wide open.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it. The text actually uses a similar spatial metaphor, referring to this as leaving a small, connectable surface.
Okay.
And they say you implement this through low-damage protocols.
Low damage protocols. What does that mean in real life?
Consider the everyday phrase, see you later.
Just see you later.
Yeah. When you use that phrase at the end of a slightly awkward, mismatched reunion, you are making a legally binding contract for deep, immediate intimacy. But crucially, you also aren't severing the tie.
It is a low damage protocol.
Right. It leaves a blank margin for future connection. It acknowledges the present reality without forcing a rigid conclusion about the future.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because if my brain is projecting this outdated past standard onto my friend, it has to be doing the exact same thing to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because as we're sitting there trying to figure out this new emotional distance and realizing how much the other person has changed, there's a mirror effect happening.
A very intense mirror effect.
When we notice they are different, we are violently confronted with the uncomfortable fact that we have changed too.
And that mirror effect is often the true underlying source of the discomfort in a reunion. Reconnecting isn't merely about observing the other person. It is a profound recontact with our past selves.
Wow.
We discussed earlier how the brain relies on cached data to freeze people in our memories like a photograph. What we forget is that we freeze ourselves in that exact same photograph.
So when I sit down with my old college roommate, I'm not just dealing with the 35-year-old version of them. I'm suddenly face to face with the 20-year-old version of me.
Yes.
And I have to look at that past version of myself and reconcile it with who I am today.
The reunion forces you to reobserve your old expectations and dependencies. You start asking yourself internally, why was I so drawn to them back then?
What was it about my life at 20 that made this specific dynamic feel so essential for my survival?
Exactly. What couldn't I say to them? What was I afraid of? The deepest value of a reunion, especially an awkward one, is that it forcefully updates our own self-understanding, not just our social circles.
It's like you can't actually perceive the scale of your own growth until it bumps up against a mold you used to fit perfectly into, like trying to put on an old tailored jacket. You only realize how much your shoulders have broadened when the seams start to aggressively pull.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reflective humanism texts take this exact mechanism, this tension between the saved past and the evolving present, and they scale it up.
Scale it up how?
They argue this isn't just a quirk of human psychology. It is a structural reality that applies to the grander systems of our world.
Mm.
For instance, it profoundly impacts our relationship with technology.
Specifically artificial intelligence, right?
Exactly.
Well, if human memory acts like a flawed, lazy hard drive that freezes people in time, what happens when we interact with actual hard drives?
Right, because an AI doesn't have flawed memory.
Exactly. If I use an AI and it saves all my chat logs, it has a perfect, objective, unblinking memory of exactly what I said 3 years ago. Doesn't that make the AI a perfect restoration machine?
It creates the powerful illusion of perfect restoration.
Illusion.
Yeah. The data itself is saved perfectly, sure. But reflective humanism points out that if the user's present location, meaning their mindset, their values, the context of their life, has shifted over those 3 years, then the actual meaning of that old prompt has fundamentally changed.
Oh, I see.
If an AI simply spits your old words back at you to enforce a past version of yourself, it ceases to be a helpful tool. It becomes a device of restriction. It artificially locks you in the past.
It holds me to that past standard we talked about with the coffee shop friend. The computer's essentially saying, but you definitively stated this 3 years ago. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, but I've lived 3 years of life since then. I'm a completely different person.
To solve this, the framework argues that AI should be designed to operate in what it calls a health scan mode.
Health scan mode.
Rather than acting as a rigid, unyielding ledger of who you used to be, the AI should function as a transparent interference surface.
A transparent interference surface. Okay, that sounds incredibly technical. What does that actually look like on a screen when I'm interacting with it?
Instead of the AI just silently executing a task based on your 2021 preferences, it acts as a reflective mirror. It might prompt you by saying, 3 years ago, you valued this specific approach to this problem. Given your recent projects, how are you approaching this today?
Oh, wow. So it's actively asking me to update my own cached data?
Yes. It reflects the difference between your past self and your present self. It introduces a slight interference to make you aware of the passage of time, but without forcing a conclusion.
That is so much healthier than just blindly executing old instructions.
The text described two distinct ways this generation of meaning happens between a user and a system. One is a collision gradient.
Collision gradient, that sounds aggressive.
It is. This is forced, painful friction. It's discontinuous. It's like running full speed into a brick wall of who you used to be because the system demands an immediate, radical update that you weren't prepared for.
And the alternative?
The alternative is an inquiry gradient.
An inquiry gradient, so asking questions rather than forcing conclusions.
Maintaining a gentle, continuous update. An inquiry gradient keeps the space open. It minimizes the shock of change by allowing the user, or the friend in the coffee shop for that matter, to slowly tune their own frequency to the present reality.
Rather than violently clashing against it.
Exactly.
Okay, so if this structural mismatch happens between two friends in a cafe and it happens between a human and a computer interface, what about a million people?
You mean society at large?
Yeah. What happens when an entire civilization attempts a restoration project? Like when a society gets nostalgic and tries to revive a historical institution or an old cultural tradition?
We see the exact same structural failure, just on a macro scale.
Really?
Yeah, a civilization might look back at a perceived golden age and conclude, if we just reinstall those exact same 19th century laws or those exact same traditions, we will automatically generate the exact same societal stability.
But they are entirely ignoring the blank period.
Completely ignoring it.
The civilizational video game kept playing while that tradition was offline.
Exactly. The population structure has fundamentally shifted. The technological landscape is unrecognizable. The flow of information and global values have moved further down the timeline.
So you can't just copy and paste the past.
If you take a 19th century institution and forcefully impose it onto a 21st century society, it will not function as a stabilizing force. It will function completely differently, often causing profound structural harm.
Because it's a phase mismatch on a massive civilizational scale.
Yes.
You have an outdated societal rulebook trying to sit down for coffee with a modern population, and they are in completely different temporal zones. The friction must be catastrophic.
It is. True civilizational continuity, according to reflective humanism, is not about freezing the past in amber. It's about regeneration.
Updating the method of connection.
Right. It is the active, ongoing process of reconnecting saved historical history with present, lived conditions to update its meaning. Just as a friendship must renegotiate its terms to survive, a society must constantly renegotiate its traditions with the present reality.
Because if it refuses to do so, those traditions transform from a foundation into a straitjacket.
Beautifully put.
So what does this all mean for you listening? If we zoom all the way back down from the collapse of civilizations and the architecture of AI, back down to you, sitting at that small table in the coffee shop.
The core realization here is that reconnection is never a time machine.
You cannot go backward. Whether you are dealing with an old friend you haven't spoken to in a decade, a digital companion bringing up your old data, or a society trying to figure out its heritage, the structural rule remains identical.
We have to let go of the past standard.
We must embrace the current reality, acknowledge the blank period, and build a completely new connection from the present. We have to let the relationship regenerate.
And, engaging in that regeneration requires a specific kind of grace.
Yeah, it does.
It requires us to accept that initial awkwardness, not as a red flag of failure, but simply as the mechanical friction of two different timelines attempting to synchronize.
Which completely reframes the entire experience. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to take this framework just one step further for you.
Go for it.
We've talked about how this past standard unfairly judges our friends and how it can damage societies. But think about your own personal archives for a moment. Think about your old journals or scrolling back through photos of yourself from 5 or 10 years ago.
That's a great point.
If reconnecting with an old friend requires you to drop the past standard and embrace who they are today, how fairly are you judging yourself when you look at those old entries?
Are you looking at your past self through a collision gradient?
Exactly.
Wow.
Cringing and judging who you were based on the data you have now. Or are you using an inquiry gradient, allowing that past version of you to simply be a stepping stone? We spend so much time worrying about how to reconnect with others, we often forget that we are constantly tasked with reconnecting with ourselves.
That is such a profound application of the framework. If we cannot step into the same river twice, we certainly cannot demand that our past selves knew how to swim in the currents we are navigating today.
I love that.
And I actually want to leave the listeners with a final lingering question drawn from the source's concept of phase zero and transparent pain.
Let's hear it.
If the initial awkwardness of reunion is just a friction of two different timelines colliding, what if that slight pain isn't a sign of failure at all? What if it is the exact spark of energy required to generate a brand new layer of consciousness? Is reunion really about getting back a lost connection? Or is it the rare opportunity to meet the exact same person for the very first time all over again?
That is an amazing thought to end on. Next time you're sitting across from someone you used to know, or even just looking in the mirror at the person you used to be, try looking through that lens of regeneration. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep that door slightly cracked, embrace the inquiry gradient, and we'll see you next time.